Hey guys, DB McRae here. Welcome to part 2 of Do's and Don'ts of Street Level Activism. Now, I have to sit down because I'm 5 foot 18 inches tall. So it's not practical because I have to bend down so I'm just going to sit in the chair if you don't mind and we'll go through this list. So anyway, this is part 2 of Street Level Activism, Do's and Don'ts, and these are the first 10 things that I came up with. I'm going to have multi-part because I'm going to have probably a total of at least 24, maybe as high as 30 different suggestions and recommendations on how activists can be more effective and how they can get past these idiot cops who don't know their job, and usually end up in some kind of false arrest. Okay, so again, no particular order of importance. And before we really get into this, I probably will get interrupted by some of my woodland friends, especially those feathered friends. So anyway, we'll just muster our way through. Okay, the first thing I want to mention way up here is that no matter what a cop watcher, no matter what an auditor, no matter what an activist does, if you have a Kay Fisher from Dothan, Alabama, or an Andrea Camella from Cranston, Rhode Island show up, unless you give ID, you're going to go to jail. And the thing that these cops have no concept of, they're so stupid and vacuous, is that they're checking papers. It is Nazi Germany, because when all else fails, they just go after your papers. And at least 50% of the time, those corrupt local prosecutors will take the case. And they're going to stack charges. And they haven't protected and served anyone other than their fragile ego or whatever's in their best interest. So every activist has to make that decision whether or not they're going to ID or go to jail. I mean, it's a tough decision. I guess you can look at it like Rosa Parks. She made the decision to go to jail. That's what it was all about. So leave that up to each activist, okay? The cars that go by, if they're colored red or blue, they do that. Should be even reasonable suspicion or probable cause just to pull them over based on the color of the car. Okay, so nothing will prevent an unlawful arrest. These are strictly recommendations and strategy. I don't want to go through anything that could be interpreted as me writing scripts. I'll go through some basic concepts like verbal judo and stuff, but otherwise I'd rather just keep it general, okay? Just kind of the bigger picture without necking it down too much. That's what the activists can do, okay? And the number one thing before we get into this list of the first 10 recommendations is know the law, guys. You have to know the law. Too many activists go out there, they don't know case law, they stumble through, and I'm going to put a plug in for Rise of the Oathbreakers. I have to. You'll learn the law in this book. You don't have to go to your local library or even try to find all the information out there in Google land. Get the book. And when you're doing your cop watchers and activist work, take the copy with you. Use it as, I guess you could say, a quick reference guide or to go through as a refresher. So yeah, I'm going to plug the book. That's why I wrote it. I wrote it for you guys and for every freedom-loving American. So remember, 2 years and 8,000 hours. I'd really like people to at least explore the book. Okay. I'll let this car go by. It's almost 5 o'clock, so there's going to be a fair amount of traffic, even on a fairly remote road like where I live. All right. Point number 1. Parroting other activists. watching activist after activist after activist going out and deciding that you want to get involved with street level activism, which is wonderful. But if you're making a mistake, guys, if you're just going to parrot, say and do what the other activists before you have done, it doesn't mean that their methodology is correct or right, or it reflects legal matters. Let me give you an example when it comes to parroting what other activists say and do. It's going to come with a challenge. When you get a cop show up, you're suspicious. This is suspicious activity. And they want to detain based on that. You can't just let them say it and start acting off it. You got to call them on it. You have to do something that helps move the needle in their little finite brain off of, well, detaining based on suspicion, mere suspicion. And here's what I want to talk about on that particular parroting comment. You know, the favorite thing that a lot of activists like to say is suspicion. Is that a felony or a misdemeanor? And they use it from one activist to the next, to the next, to the next. Now, here's my challenge. I want everybody to go out there, watch videos. And when activists say that, is that a felony or a misdemeanor? Watch the officer's reactions. Okay? It sets them back for just a couple, 3 seconds. But then they're right back at it. No, but it's still suspicious. You haven't moved that needle off suspicion at all. Go watch. You know, one of the things you have to assess is how effective your methods are. Is that a felony or a misdemeanor? Wouldn't it be better to say, that's not the legal test? Who trained you? You don't detain off mere suspicion or hunches or gut feelings, or to conduct fishing expeditions. Whatever. You can't just say felony or a misdemeanor. And again, it's because it doesn't work. Okay? Don't take my word for it. Go out there into Google land and watch these videos. Okay, so that's number one, just simply parroting what other activists say or do. Number two is lacking verbal judo skills. Lacking verbal judo skills. You know how quickly you can shut a cop down when you make them look stupid? Of course, they can make themselves look stupid all by themselves. But why not help them through that process? For instance, when you get some smart aleck cop and he says something like, where'd you get your law degree? What do you say? Verbal judo. Think about it. You know what you say? Same place you got yours. I don't know if it'll work or not, but it's a lot more effective than, well, I don't need a law degree. See, you gotta cut them off. Okay, just learn some of the verbal judo stuff. Here's another one up here. Well, someone called. Well, I don't care if the Pope called. I remember one time that an activist said, well, I don't care if God called. If he didn't report a crime, you can't detain. And when they say someone called or the concern, here's another one I thought of. So you're telling me if somebody calls 911 to report their cat is in a tree, that if you come out there, you can throw them in a cage if they don't ID? What's the difference? Something that puts the onus back on the officer. Just think about this stuff, okay? It's called, and I use it all the time in Rise of the Oathbreakers, and I mention it in the disclaimer and background section right up front. They're called arguments of absurdity, where you use an absurd example to prove that the original point is stupid. It doesn't make sense. So an argument of absurdity. So if I called you to get a cat out of a tree, you can jam me up over ID. You can throw me in a cage if I don't surrender my ID. And, you know, nothing wrong with saying something like, oh, you little Nazi, you little goose-stepping Nazi, so you're going to check my papers under threat of violence. whatever. But, when they do this, we got a call and they want to start jamming activists up over ID and stuff. Gotta move the needle. You gotta get them off that. Just like if, well, you're suspicious, okay? Something to think about, that's all. Oh, here's one. Number 3 on the board. And hi, Mr. Hummingbird. And I promised to answer this one in the previous video on part 1. And that is, when an activist asks an officer, is that a lawful order? Okay, wait. That's an open-ended question. Never ask a cop an open-ended question. When an activist says to an officer, is that a lawful order? Guys, what's the officer going to say? How's he going to respond? Yes. And the activist says, no, it's not. They've already painted themselves into a corner by asking the question. Why do you ask questions? For purposes of clarification. Teacher, what's 1 + 1? And she says 2. You don't say, no, it's not. You're seeking an answer. You're seeking clarification. So to try and walk that back after asking, is that a lawful order? Are you kidding? I always cringe when I hear them say that, because it's like, why don't you just do something else? Go whatever, go pick peaches, but don't do that. Don't ask open-ended questions. They're only going to come back with an answer that you don't want to hear. And now you've painted yourself into a corner, because it brings up, now what? You asked and he answered. Doesn't matter if he's right or wrong. Okay? It doesn't matter. You asked the question. So don't be asking if that's a lawful order. And the next one, number 4, is, now this is the other one I promised to talk about in the first part 1 video on do's and don'ts. And that is when an activist says, go ahead and do your investigation, or conduct your investigation. Nope. Get that out of the vocabulary. Why? What's the key word in that? Go ahead and conduct your investigation. What's the key word? Guys, there is no investigation. There's no crime to investigate. And when you tell them to go ahead and do their investigation, you're basically telling them, yeah, I committed a crime. You just have to go figure it out. Okay, this is what happens when I look at this from the perspective of a former officer. Okay, so you say something like that, you're basically, again, telling the officer there's something to investigate, and police investigate crimes. You see the connection? Be careful. That's why you don't want to parrot each other. Be independent. That's all I'm suggesting. Number 5, the use of profanity. Now, there's something called an excited utterance, which means it's just kind of spontaneous profanity. But to use profanity as a matter of routine, I'm telling you, if you get falsely arrested and you used all sorts of profanity, not only are they probably filming with their body cams, but you probably have it locked in too with your cameras. So you get arrested, and you go in front of a judge, and he reviews that video, and you're cussing like a drunken sailor. Good luck. Or how about that shows up in front of a jury, and not just a criminal jury. Come on, guys, it could be a civil trial in front of a civil jury on a lawsuit. You're done. Okay, this is strategy. Like I said, sometimes it's an excited utterance, but try to avoid profanity, okay? It doesn't help anything. It doesn't further the cause. It doesn't make, fighting An illegitimate arrest or civil case, it doesn't help. Okay, number 6. Those of you, nighttime or daytime, it makes no difference, who start interjecting themselves into let's say a traffic stop. I'm talking about providing free legal advice, yelling, you don't have to do this, passenger, you can walk away. No, they can't. Telling somebody, you don't have, okay, here's the problem with that. Most times the activist is wrong. Secondly, that is interfering. That is almost, other than a physical obstruction or interfering, when you start doing that kind of stuff, that's interfering. If I were back in the field as a game warden, with the situations that I encountered as a matter of routine, and somebody was over there giving free legal advice, you understand there's consequences with that. What if the person listens? You don't have to stick around, you know. You're just a passenger and they start walking away. And there's multiple officers on scene. Good luck with that. Guys, I'm going to say this very bluntly. Keep your damn mouth shut. The goal is to observe and document, okay? You don't interject yourself into these stops. Be quiet. I can't, that's another one I can't stress enough. You don't interject, all right? And, you know, like I said, if these people listen, they're going to probably get hurt. At a minimum, they may get arrested. But they may actually get hurt because an activist standing across the street was yelling out free legal advice. Never do that. Here's another one, is activists who simply get too close. You have to give the officers some breathing room. You know, isn't there zoom on your cameras? Now, I've heard something else that activists have said, and that is, well, I have to get close enough to hear the conversation. No, you don't. Absolutely, no, you don't. You have no idea the nature of the information that's being passed back and forth. It's not a matter of you can watch, but to think that you can get close enough to be able to pick up their conversations on audio, don't do it. That is, they may be in public and you may be in public, but you know what? There is a line in the sand. And if you think you have to get so close to hear the conversation, that's a mistake. It's almost like you're begging to get arrested for obstruction or interference. You don't need to get that close. It doesn't matter if you're on a public sidewalk, you can still get too close. And just leave that up to your best judgment, that this is just a warning from a former officer. I've had that happen, and I had to tell him, move along or else. You don't need to get that close. Okay, number 8. When the cops show up and they start bringing up that we got a call, people are concerned, you know, they're nervous, and the activist agrees with the officer. But you know, you can understand, see, now they're playing a game. You can understand why people would be concerned, and the activist says, oh no, I understand. Well, sure, I understand. No, you don't understand. You never agree with cops, especially when they're cop-splaining. And the activists who agree, they don't just do it once during an interaction, they do it over and over. Well, sure. No, I understand. God. You're admitting there's a problem and that you created it. That's not helpful. Number 9, the activists who blah, 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 yada, 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 they talk. Talk. Right into handcuffs and a cage. Either don't talk, or if you do it judiciously. Do it smartly. The best thing to do is not talk. okay? You take that ability for the cops to use something against you away completely. And then number 10, we'll end on this one, but this is really critical. Oh, guys, this is parroting. Again, it's parroting. And here's what I'm talking about. When the activist says, what's your RAS? What's your reasonable, articulable suspicion that I have committed, am committing, or will commit a crime? What's wrong with that? Let the car go by. Give you time to think. It's too long, and it's too complicated to say under stress. Remember, cops aren't good listeners. By the time you get into basically what your RAS, they're not listening. You have to shorten it. You don't have to think about trying to say, what's your reasonable, articulable, people just stumble and butcher it. Can you articulate a specific crime? Can you articulate reasonable suspicion of a specific crime? Otherwise, you can pound sand. Stop saying, what is your reasonable art? See, you can't say it, especially under stress. And especially when it's apparent that they're just going to arrest. Cops aren't listening to it. And it's too long to say, and it's too hard to say under stress. So, let's just recap, okay? Don't just parrot what other activists say and do. You have to learn some verbal judo skills. Number 3, don't ask a cop if that's a lawful order. Number 4, don't tell them, go ahead and do your investigation. There's nothing to investigate. And that's where verbal judo and cutting them off from their cop-splaining, you have to do that. There's nothing to investigate. It's that simple. What are you investigating? You investigate crimes, right? Well, what crime are you investigating? That's because there is no crime. Then number 5, using profanity, especially as a matter of routine. You can warn against it. Number 6, yelling legal advice, interjecting into the stop, whatever the situation is, and providing legal advice. That is interfering. In fact, like I said, other than a physical act, when you start yelling and you start telling people from a distance to shut up, don't say anything, you don't have to, you're a passenger, you can walk away. I don't care what it is. You're setting yourself up like a golf ball on a tee. And the cops are the clubs. Just observe and document. Getting too close, again, that speaks for itself. The mistake of agreeing with officers when they're cop-splaining. No, I understand. No, sure. I know. You don't agree with officers. If anything, you disagree. And activists who talk too much during an interaction and then using reasonable, articulable suspicion, shorten it. Cut it down to something that's concise and that you can say clearly under stress, because it's going to be stressful. Okay? So that's the end of part 2 of the do's and don'ts of street level activism. I don't know. I hope that everybody's, or most folks, have learned. And again, part 3 is going to be more of this, because I'm just going to throw this stuff out there, and it's up to the activists to determine whatever sticks. So, all right. I'm going to get to work on part 3. In the meantime, you guys take care, stay safe, and continue the fight for our freedom. Because if not us,